Hopefully you completed the listening quiz to determine how well of a listener you are, because this section is on practicing active listening. And I know each of us can work on being a better listener. So let's take a look at the information provided in your text. Experts say that most people recall only 25 to 50% of what they hear. Very interesting statistic. That means your boss, your coworkers, your customers, your classmates, they only retain half or less of what you say. So what's important is if you are a good listener, you will make a good manager. So you really want to practice on being a better listener. I personally need to work at this myself. The famous American entrepreneur Malcolm Forbes wrote, "The art of conversation lies in listening." Active emphatic listening is the most effective form of listening. That's what researchers say. So, emphatic listening, okay, that is a very listening to in an effort to see the world through another's eyes. That's what emphatic listening is. Being less judgmental and seeking common ground. The word emphatic means having empathy, relating to that person, not judging that person. So when we are mindful, we are fully present. This is something we all need to work on, I'm sure, being fully present, listening. This is the most effective form of listening according to research. So this means being fully present in an effort to build trust and gain respect. So listening skills are important in your career in order to be successful. And there are barriers. But before we discuss these barriers, let's talk about a quote that Alex Doman, he's an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and a music producer. He said, ultimately, listening is an expression of conscious intention, caring, and compassion for one another. If we take the time to truly connect and to listen, we learn far more than through any words that we speak. So think about that quote this week and try to be a better listener. And when you're trying to be a better listener, it's important to identify barriers and try to get rid of those barriers. Physical barriers are some that we can relate to. Some of these can be physical, including hearing disabilities. I personally have seen a disability with my son. He has type 1 diabetes, and when his blood sugar is high or low, when it's high, he can't concentrate, and when it's low, he feels sleepy. So those are disabilities that affect his listening. Poor acoustics, noisy surroundings. We know noise interferes with our listening. It's hard to hear someone over a loud noise and you get distracted. But it's also difficult to listen if you're ill, and that's what I was talking about with my son. It's very hard for him to concentrate when his blood sugars are high or low. And you all have been in a class where you're falling asleep. Of course you can't listen if you're tired, and then if you're uncomfortable. An example of that would be if you're cold in a classroom or if you're hot in a classroom. It does distract you from listening. Psychological barriers. If other ideas run counter to our cultural, ethical, and personal values, we're going to tune those speakers out. And you all probably can relate to that as well. Another Let's see. Another one is language problems. So if there's a word that you're not sure of, then if you don't know the meaning of the word, that can change your whole interpretation. Okay? If you have an emotional, if it affects you emotionally, then you can't focus. So if you get angry or you get really upset or sad, that's going to, those words or that make that emotion, strike that emotion in you, that's going to affect your ability to listen. Nonverbal distractions. Okay? If you notice like a unusual clothing or their speech is different or their body is twitching or a radical hairstyle, that's going to prevent you from listening. That's going to distract you from listening. It says, and there's so many interesting statistics in this class, and I love this to know these things. Listeners can process 450 words a minute. Because speakers talk about 125 to 175 words per minute, we can become bored and our minds start wandering. I am very guilty of this. For example, my sister tells a story and it takes her forever to tell the story because she puts so many details in it. So I'm not even listening because she's giving me information and she's taking forever to get to the point. Then she loses me. And the difference between a rate of speaking and a rate of listening is called speech thought differential. That's an interesting term. So think about that next time right now when I'm lecturing. Okay, if you're hearing what I'm saying and you're like, she's taking forever, you may start thinking about what's for supper tonight? What am I going to cook? What else do I need to do? What homework do I have? Your mind really starts wondering. Oh, I've seen this. Faking attention. Let me get back to it. Okay. I've seen this in church. Okay, my grandfather did this. I don't think he was listening, but he always shook his head. It's so funny because now I see my son doing the same thing, but I think he is actually listening. So faking attention. So it's shaking your head and acting like you're listening, but you're not. All right, and then you have grandstanding. And because our experiences are important to us, we fail to listen carefully when we're just waiting politely for the next pause so that we can have our turn to speak. I am so guilty of this one, and this is something that I'm really trying to work on. Instead of thinking about what I'm going to say next, to just be present and actively listening to the speaker. So here are some ways that you can practice active listening. So I want you to do this week to really try to listen. So one thing is stop talking. Another thing is control the listening environment. Get rid of those barriers. Show empathy. Show empathy. Relate to that person. Be able to distinguish between facts and opinion. Capitalize on lag time. Listen between the lines and validate emotion. Try to understand where the person is coming from. Notes, take notes. This is something that I have to do because I'm not a good listener. So I have to take notes. Then provide encouraging feedback. Give them feedback so that they know that you're listening. Now, this was a group activity, but we're not going to do it. But you can try this with someone just to see if they're listening. You can try this if you have children. This is a good thing to do. So, one person tells a story, just any story. It doesn't have to be real, and it doesn't have to be complicated. All right, and then after you tell the story, the listener has to retell it back. Okay, and give each person a chance to play the role of listener. And then you can think about, well, what did you learn about yourself from this? Which of the powerful listening skills did you employ? And which listening barriers did you fall prey to? So I hope that this section really helps you. This is something we all need to work on. And when I say all, I'm including myself. So I hope that this week you will be a better listener. Let me know if you have any questions.